The night they pushed me out the door, I had $43 in my pocket, no phone, no plan, and nowhere to go. And the worst part? The people who did it, they smiled. His name was Rayon, 26 years old. The kind of man who still believed that if you worked hard enough, if you stayed loyal enough, if you gave enough of yourself, life would be fair. He wasn't naive. He was just raised to trust. He had spent 4 years building something from nothing inside a small company in the city. Started as an entry-level assistant, the one who came in before everyone else and left after the lights went off. He learned every corner of that business. The clients, the systems, the numbers, the language. He covered for people when they were late. He solved problems no one else wanted to touch. He missed weddings, skipped holidays, answered emails at midnight. His family was proud. His mother would tell the neighbors, "My son, he is going places." And for a while, it felt true. He had a small apartment, a few good friendships, and a dream he was slowly building toward. Life wasn't perfect, but it felt like it was finally going somewhere. He didn't know the floor was about to disappear beneath his feet. For the first 2 years, Rayon was untouchable, not because he was arrogant, but because he was genuinely good at what he did. His manager, a man named Tariq, would pull him aside after meetings and say things like, "You're the only one here I can actually count on." Rayon believed him. Why wouldn't he? The words felt real. He started taking on more responsibility, more pressure, more invisible weight. When a major client almost walked, Rayon stayed up 3 nights straight and fixed it. When the team missed a deadline, Rayon absorbed the blame in the meeting and quietly fixed the problem afterward. He became the quiet engine that kept everything moving. And he was okay with that because he thought it was building towards something. A promotion, a raise, recognition, belonging. He thought he was family. Then a new person arrived. Someone with connections, a polished resume, and a talent for speaking in meetings without actually saying anything. His name doesn't matter. What matters is this. Within 3 months, he was being positioned above Rayon. Not because he earned it, but because he knew the right people and wore the right clothes and laughed at the right jokes. Rayon noticed but said nothing. He told himself, just keep working. The truth always rises. But then the assignments started shifting. The good projects, the visible ones, they went to the new person. Rayon was handed the difficult, invisible work, the work no one else wanted. And when he completed it brilliantly, the credit drifted elsewhere, like smoke in a room where everyone pretends not to notice. He started staying later, working harder. As if effort could solve what was actually a political problem. As if loyalty could fix a system that had already decided he wasn't the chosen one. His body started showing the pressure. Headaches in the morning. Tight chest at night. He'd lie awake, running through conversations, wondering what he'd done wrong, what he could do differently, how he could make them see him again the way they used to. He was shrinking, and he didn't even know it yet. Then came the project that would change everything, a major contract renewal, 6 months of work, everything riding on the presentation. Rayon was assigned to lead it. He poured himself into it completely. Nights, weekends, his full heart. He built something genuinely brilliant. The morning of the presentation, he sent the final files to Tariq for review. He never heard back. The presentation happened. Without him, someone else stood in that room in front of those clients and delivered Rayon's work. Rayon found out through a colleague who mentioned it casually, the way people mention things they assume you already know. He sat at his desk for a long time after that, very still, the kind of still that comes before something breaks. He went to Tariq's office, calmly, professionally, asked what happened. Tariq leaned back in his chair and said the project had been reassigned for strategic reasons. No apology, no explanation. Just a tone that suggested Rayon should be grateful he still had a job. That night, Rayon walked home in the rain. He didn't call anyone. He just walked and let the cold water hit his face and thought about the 4 years he had poured into that place. The sacrifices, the silence, the times he had swallowed his pride to protect a team that was never protecting him. He thought about his mother's voice. "My son, he is going places." And for the first time, he let himself cry. 3 weeks later, he was called into a meeting. No warning. Tariq was there. Someone from HR was there. They had printed papers on the table. They told him the company was restructuring. His role was being eliminated. They slid a form across the table. They asked him to sign it. They gave him a box for his things. And then this is the part that stays with him as he picked at that box. Tariq said, "You'll land on your feet. You're a smart guy." Like it was a compliment. Like 4 years had been nothing more than a transaction that had simply concluded. He walked out into the afternoon sun with that box, $43 in his wallet, and a silence inside him so deep it felt like drowning. No one called to check on him. Not one person from that office, people he had covered for, stayed late for, carried on his back, reached out. Not one. That silence was its own kind of violence. He sat in his apartment for 3 days. Not in despair exactly, more like stillness. Like a man who has finally stopped running and is now forced to feel where all the running has taken him. On the fourth day, something shifted. He opened his notebook, the one he used to scribble ideas in late at night. Ideas he never had time to develop because he was always too busy building someone else's dream. And he started reading his own thoughts. Plans he had written, problems he had solved, systems he had quietly built from scratch that the company was still using and would keep using with his name nowhere on them. He realized something that hit him harder than any betrayal. He had been valuable all along. They hadn't thrown out a nobody. They had thrown out someone who scared them, someone who was outgrowing the cage they needed him to stay in. They didn't let him go because he wasn't enough. They let him go because he was too much, and they knew it. That realization didn't make the pain disappear, but it changed the shape of it. It stopped feeling like rejection. It started feeling like redirection. He took one client with him, a small one, someone who had always respected him personally, who'd once said quietly after a meeting, "You're the reason this works, you know." He reached out honestly, told them he was starting something, asked if they'd come with him. They said yes. That one yes became the foundation. He worked from his kitchen table for 7 months. Alone, underfunded, some days eating instant noodles and going to sleep anxious. There were moments he almost called Tariq and asked for his job back. He nearly did it twice. Both times, he opened his notebook instead and read his own words back to himself. Slowly, the one client became 3. 3 became 9. Word spread the way good work always eventually does. Quietly, through people who care about quality more than appearances. A year and a half after they pushed him out with a box and $43, Rayon signed a contract larger than anything that company had ever landed. He didn't post about it online. He didn't call Tariq. He didn't need to. He just sat with it for a moment, in silence in his own office now, with his name on the door, and thought about that rainy night when he'd walked home and cried and wondered if his mother was right about him. She was. Here is the truth no one tells you about betrayal. The people who throw you away are usually not wrong about your value. They're wrong about who deserves it. They saw what you were capable of. That's exactly why they tried to keep you small, take your credit, manage your growth, and eventually push you out before you realized you didn't need them. The cruelest part of being underestimated is that it often comes from the people who understand your worth the most. So when someone throws you away, when the door closes and the phone goes quiet and you're standing there with nothing, don't ask yourself what you did wrong. Ask yourself what you were becoming that made them afraid, because the pain of being discarded is real. But so is what you build in the silence after. There are people watching this right now who are still carrying the weight of a betrayal they haven't told anyone about, still working in places that don't see them, still healing from people who took everything and left quietly. If Rayon's story moved you, leave a comment below. Not for the algorithm, for the person who will scroll down feeling exactly what you felt and need to know someone else survived it too. Like this video if it found you at the right moment. Subscribe to Legacy of Pain, because every week we tell another story that deserves to be heard. And if you're in the middle of your own storm right now, hold on. The box they hand you on the way out might just be the beginning of everything you were meant to build. There is something deeply humbling about starting over at a kitchen table. Not a desk, not an office, not a place that says professional or serious or this man is going somewhere. Just a table, the same one where Rayan ate breakfast. The same one where he paid his bills and stacked his unopened mail and sometimes just sat with a cup of tea going cold, staring at nothing. That table became his entire world for the first month. He had one laptop, one client, one prayer. He would wake up before the sun, not because he was disciplined, not because he had some morning routine from a self-help book, but because anxiety woke him up. The chest-tightening, throat-closing kind of anxiety that sits on you like a stone the moment your eyes open and you remember, there is no salary coming. There is no team behind you. There is no building to walk into where your badge still works and your name is still on the roster. There is only you, and this table, and the terrifying freedom of having nothing left to lose. He would make tea, open his laptop, and begin. Some mornings the work flowed. Ideas came fast, clear, purposeful. He would type for hours without looking up, and when he finally did, the window would be dark and half a day had passed without him noticing. Those were the good days. Those were the days he felt like himself, the real version, not the one that had been slowly worn down in that office over 4 years. Other mornings were different. Other mornings he would sit at that table and stare at a blank document for an hour, the cursor blinking, patient, merciless. And the voice in his head, the one that sounded suspiciously like every person who had ever doubted him, would say, "Who do you think you are? You couldn't even keep a job. What makes you think you can build something?" Those mornings, he didn't fight the voice. He had learned, slowly, painfully, that fighting it only made it louder. Instead, he would open his notebook. The old one, with the bent cover and the pages that were soft from handling. He would read something he had written months or years ago. A problem he had solved, a system he had designed, a moment he had been genuinely proud of. And he would remember, not in a triumphant way, not in a fist pump motivational poster kind of way, just quietly, a small ember catching again, enough to start. He always started. The second month was the month of phone calls. He reached out to everyone he knew professionally, former colleagues, industry contacts, people he had met at events and conferences over the years, people who had shaken his hand and said, "Let's definitely stay in touch," and handed him cards that he had saved carefully in a folder on his desk. He called them. He emailed them. He sent careful, professional messages that took him sometimes an hour to write. He was not begging. He was not desperate. Or at least, he was trying not to sound it. He was simply reaching out, letting people know he was available, that he was building something, that he was good at what he did and was looking for opportunities to prove it. Most of them didn't reply. Some replied with the kind of messages that are somehow worse than silence. The warm, vague ones full of words like absolutely and let's circle back and I'll keep you in mind. The messages that mean nothing and are designed to mean nothing, just enough courtesy to make the sender feel like a decent person without actually costing them anything. A few calls were genuinely painful. There was one man, someone Rayan had helped significantly, had covered for, had saved from a very public professional embarrassment, who answered the phone warmly, listened to Rayan for 10 minutes, said all the right things, and then never followed through on a single word he'd said. Rayan called back once, then again. Then he stopped. He added that man's name to a quiet list in the back of his mind. Not a list of enemies, not a list of people to punish or expose, just a list of people whose words he would never again weigh more than their actions. That list grew that month, longer than he expected, longer than he wanted. But here's what else happened that month, quietly, between the silences and the non-replies and the hollow promises. A few people, not many, maybe 4 or 5, responded with something real. A woman named Sarah, who had briefly worked alongside him 3 years earlier and had moved on to her own venture, replied to his email within an hour. She didn't have work for him. She wasn't in a position to refer clients. But she wrote him 3 paragraphs, real ones. She told him she had heard what happened. She told him she had always thought he was one of the most genuinely talented people she had encountered in this industry. She told him that the people who had let him go had made a mistake they would eventually feel the cost of. And she told him to keep going. He read that email 4 times. Then he printed it out, which he had not done with anything in years, and put it on the wall above his kitchen table. He is not ashamed of that. It kept him going on at least 3 occasions when nothing else would have. There was also a man named Omar, an older gentleman he had met only once at a conference 2 years ago, who called him back not to offer work but to say, "I remember you. You asked smart questions. You were paying attention when everyone else was performing. Whatever you're building, it's going to be good. I just wanted you to know someone believes that." Omar had nothing to gain from making that call. He made it anyway. Rayan thinks about Omar a lot, about what it means to be that kind of person. The kind who takes 10 minutes out of their day to call someone not because it benefits them, but because they remember what it felt like to need exactly that. It happened in the third month. Not dramatically, not the way it happens in movies where there's a single dark moment with dramatic music and a turning point that arrives on cue. It happened on a Tuesday. An ordinary, unremarkable Tuesday in the middle of a week that felt identical to every week before it. He had lost a potential client that day. Someone who had seemed genuinely interested, who had taken 2 meetings with him, who had said the words, "I think we're going to move forward with you," and then gone silent for 2 weeks before finally sending a short email saying they had decided to go in a different direction. No explanation, just the direction, away from him. He had been counting on that contract, not to get rich, just to breathe, just to buy himself 2 more months of runway, to pay the rent without doing mental math at 2 a.m., to stop rationing the tea bags. When that email came, he closed his laptop. He sat in the dark for a long time. The apartment was quiet in the way that feels different from peaceful, the kind of quiet that amplifies everything inside you that you have been trying to outrun. He thought about calling his mother. He picked up the phone twice. Both times, he put it down. He didn't want to hear the worry in her voice. He didn't want to perform okayness for her, and he didn't have the heart to tell her the truth. Not yet. He thought about what it would take to just stop, to call someone, anyone, and say, "I tried. I gave it everything. It didn't work. I need a job, a regular job, any job, something with a salary and a badge and a reason to leave the apartment in the morning." The thought was not shameful. It was human, completely, understandably human. He stayed with it, let it be there, didn't fight it, didn't shame himself for thinking it. And then, slowly, reluctantly, in the way that happens sometimes when you've exhausted every other option, he opened his notebook again. He didn't read his old ideas this time. Instead, he wrote, not a plan, not a strategy, just words. Whatever came out, he wrote about what he was afraid of. He wrote about the specific texture of failure. Not the abstract concept, but the real lived version, the way it feels in your body when a door closes. He wrote about his father, who had died when Rayan was 19, who had worked his whole life for a company that handed him a small envelope and a handshake when his health gave out. He wrote about the promise he had made himself at that funeral, that he would never let someone else hold that much power over his life. He had forgotten that promise somewhere inside those 4 years. Somewhere between the late nights and the swallowed pride and the gratitude he had trained himself to perform even when it wasn't real. He had forgotten, and forgetting had cost him. By the time he stopped writing, it was past midnight. He was tired in a way that felt clean rather than heavy. Like something had been released that had been held too tight. He went to bed. He slept without anxiety for the first time in weeks. The next morning, he opened his laptop and sent 7 new emails. Not from desperation, from decision. It came on a Thursday, 6 weeks later. A referral from Sarah, who had become, quietly, one of the most important people in his life, connected him with a mid-sized company that was struggling with exactly the kind of problem Rayan had spent years solving. They were small enough to need real help and smart enough to know they needed someone who actually understood the work, not just someone who could talk about it impressively. The first meeting was a video call. Rayan sat at his kitchen table, the printed email from Sarah still on the wall, just out of frame, and he talked to them the way he always talked about work, directly, specifically without performance. He told them what he saw, what he would do, what it would cost, and why. They called back the next day. The contract wasn't enormous. By the standards of what he had been used to handling, it was modest. But it was his name, his terms, his work. No one above him to redirect the credit, no politics to navigate, no approval to wait for, no invisible ceiling he was quietly bumping against. He worked on that contract with a focus he hadn't felt in years. It was the focus that comes when the work actually belongs to you, when your name is genuinely on it, when the success is yours to keep and the failure is yours to own. He delivered early. The client was not just satisfied. They were genuinely impressed. And more importantly, they told people that is how it starts. Not with a grand announcement, not with a viral moment or a sudden breakthrough. Just one person telling another person, you should talk to him. He actually knows what he's doing. Month 7, month 8, month 9. The growth was not a rocket ship. It was not the kind of story that gets told at conferences with a dramatic slide showing a hockey stick graph. It was slower than that, more honest than that. Some months were better than others. Some months he was stretched thin, working on 3 things at once, surviving on 4 hours of sleep and the particular energy that comes when you are finally building something that matters. Other months were leaner, quieter, and he would sit at that table in the early mornings and make himself look at the numbers honestly, without flinching, without spinning them into something more comfortable than they were. He hired his first person at month 10, a young woman fresh out of university who reminded him painfully and sweetly of the person he had been when he first walked into that office 4 years ago. Bright, eager, slightly unsure of herself in ways she tried to hide. He gave her real work from day one. He told her when she did something well, specifically, not generically. He told her when something needed to be redone, and he explained exactly why. He thought about the manager who had never done any of those things for him, who had taken his best work and handed it to someone else's hands, and he thought, this is how it should have been. This is what it actually costs to lead people. Not the title, not the authority, but the daily choice to invest in someone else's growth even when it would be faster and easier to just do it yourself. She became excellent. He was proud of her in the way you can only be proud of someone when you had genuinely no ulterior motive in their success. 18 months after the box, after the $43, after the rainy walk home and the 3 days of stillness and the kitchen table and the emails that went unanswered and the voice that said, "Who do you think you are?" he signed the contract. A large one, larger than anything that company, the one that had handed him a box and smiled, had ever secured. He found out about their numbers through industry channels, the way you always eventually find out about the places you used to belong to. You stop looking for the information, it just reaches you. He didn't celebrate loudly. He didn't make any calls he would later regret. He didn't post anything with the specific intention of being seen by the people who had once decided he wasn't worth keeping. He called his mother. She answered on the second ring the way she always did. And he told her, not about the contract, not about the numbers, just that she had been right, that he was going places. That it had taken longer than either of them expected, and it had hurt more than he would ever fully explain, but she had been right. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I know. I always knew." He sat with that for a long time after the call ended, in his office, with his name on the door. At a desk that was not a kitchen table. He thought about Tariq and the man who had taken his presentation and the HR person and the box and the $43 and the rain. He felt something he hadn't expected to feel. Not triumph, not vindication, just peace. The quiet, solid, unshakable kind of peace that only comes when you have stopped needing the people who hurt you to know that they hurt you. When their acknowledgement no longer holds any power over your healing. When you have built something real enough and true enough and entirely your own that it simply doesn't matter anymore what they think. That peace is the real victory, not the contract, not the office, not the name on the door. The peace. Looking back, Rayan says the turning point was not the contract. It was not the first client, or the moment Sarah sent that email, or even the night at the kitchen table when he opened his notebook and wrote until midnight. The turning point was the morning he stopped asking, "Why did they do this to me?" and started asking, "What am I going to do with this?" That shift from the passive suffering of someone things happen to the active agency of someone who decides what happens next. That is where everything changed. It did not happen all at once. It happened in millimeters, in small daily choices to show up for his own life instead of auditioning for approval in someone else's, in the choice to call Sarah back, to open the notebook, to send the next email even when the last 7 went unanswered. He says sometimes he is grateful for what happened. Not in a toxic positivity, everything happens for a reason kind of way. He is not grateful for the betrayal itself. He does not think what they did was okay or acceptable or something he needs to forgive loudly for the world to see. He is grateful for what it revealed. About them, about the world, about himself. He is grateful to know, finally, with the kind of certainty you can only build through surviving something real, that he does not need anyone's permission to be exactly what he already was. Here's what I want you to carry with you from Rayan's story, not the success, not the contract or the office or the name on the door. Those things are real and they matter and you deserve them, but they are not the lesson. The lesson is this: the people who discard you are rarely wrong about your value. They're wrong about their right to contain it. when someone takes your work and hands it to someone else, when someone promises you a future and quietly closes the door, when the phone goes silent after you gave everything you had. They are not telling you that you are not enough. They are telling you that you are exactly enough and that they were never willing to pay what that actually costs. Loyalty has a price. Talent has a price. The kind of person who shows up before everyone else and leaves after everyone else and solves the problems no one else will touch. That person has a price. And there are managers and companies, and yes, sometimes people in our personal lives too, who will happily take all of that value and find every possible way to avoid paying it. They will keep you just grateful enough to stay, just uncertain enough to not demand more, just invested enough in what you've already built together that walking away feels like loss, until the day it costs them something, and then they hand you a box. What Rayan discovered, what you need to hear, is that the box is not an ending. It is the first honest thing they ever gave you, because inside that box is everything you were before you started shrinking for them. Every idea you didn't pitch because you were worried about how it would land. Every boundary you didn't draw because you needed to be seen as a team player. Every hour of sleep you traded for someone else's deadline. Every piece of yourself you quietly folded up and put away because the environment you were in didn't have room for the full version of you. The box gives it all back. What you do with it, that is entirely up to you. You can set it down and spend years being angry. That is human and understandable and sometimes necessary. Grief is real. Betrayal leaves marks. No one should rush you past that. But when you are ready, and you will know when you are ready, not because the pain is gone, but because you are simply more tired of being still than you are afraid of moving. Pick up the box, open your notebook, send the email, make the call, start at the kitchen table if that's all you have. There is no shame in the kitchen table. Some of the most important things in the world were built at kitchen tables by people who had been told they weren't enough, who had nothing left but themselves and a small, stubborn refusal to believe that the people who discarded them were the final word on their value. You are not too late. You are not too old, too damaged, too far behind, too broken, too ordinary, too scarred. You are exactly where Rain was the morning he opened that notebook, at the beginning. If you made it to the end of this story, I need you to know something. I did not write this for the algorithm. I did not write this to perform emotion or manufacture inspiration or give you something to forget in 20 minutes. I wrote this because there are people watching right now who are sitting at their own version of the kitchen table, who got their own version of the box, who have been carrying a betrayal so quietly, so privately, that the people closest to them have no idea how heavy it is. This is for you. Not to tell you it will all be okay. I don't know your story well enough to promise that. But to tell you that what happened to you does not define the ceiling of what is possible for you, that the people who underestimated you made a mistake, even if they never admit it. That starting over is not the same as starting from nothing, because you are taking everything you learned, everything you survived, everything you now know about who you are when things get hard, and you are bringing all of it with you. That is not nothing. That is everything. If this story reached something real in you, leave a comment below. Tell me where you are in your own journey. Tell me what your kitchen table looks like right now. You don't have to share more than you're comfortable with. Just let someone know you are here. Like this video if it found you at the right moment. Subscribe to Legacy of Pain because every week we come back here and tell another story that deserves to be heard. Stories about real people, real loss, real survival. The kind of stories that don't get told at the dinner table but live quietly inside millions of people who need to know they are not alone. You are not alone, and you are not finished. Legacy of Pain, real stories, real people, real survival. We'll see you next time.